You were only a stand-in until my real dad came back, my stepdaughter said before trying to hand over my company to her deadbeat father who abandoned her, so I froze her shares, cut her out completely, and crushed them both in court. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey guys, I've been going back and forth on posting this, but I'm stuck in my head and need to get this off my chest. So I, 46 male, raised my stepdaughter Alice, 27 female, since she was 7. Her biological dad dipped before her second birthday. No calls, no support, no visits, nothing. I married her mom, Martha, when Alice was 9, and from that point on, I stepped in. Not because it was my responsibility, but because I loved Martha. And honestly, I grew to love Alice too. I was there for everything, helping her learn multiplication tables, building her first bike, staying awake in the hospital room when she had appendicitis. Alice never had to call me dad, but she chose to. That meant the world. Life went on, and eventually, Donald faded out of conversations completely. Alice stopped waiting by the window hoping he'd show up. Martha and I built our own little family, the kind I was proud of. Over the years, that trust grew into something solid and real. Through scraped knees, heartbreaks, and school dances, I was the dad standing by her side, fiercely proud of the young woman she was becoming. I taught her responsibility and integrity, pouring years into mentoring her at the logistics business, knowing one day she'd inherit it all. Not because she had to, but because she genuinely loved it, just like I did. Our bond wasn't perfect, we argued, disagreed, and drove each other crazy like every father and daughter, but it was honest and unbreakable, or so I believed. Then, just a few months ago, Alice and her husband Matt were over for dinner. Dinner was quiet, cozy even, until Alice casually dropped a grenade on the conversation. She said without looking up, "Oh, Donald messaged me." Martha nearly choked, coughing sharply into her napkin. My heart pounded instantly, every muscle in my body tightening like I just sensed a threat in my own home. Donald, the guy who ghosted when Alice was a kid, now casually strolling back in through social media. I turned to Alice. "You didn't think that was worth mentioning before now?" "He just wanted to apologize for leaving," she said defensively. "Apparently he's been following me for a while. Just didn't want to interfere," she added, using air quotes like she was already defending him. "Apologies come easy when the hard work is already done," I said, maybe a little too harshly. But I knew exactly what Donald was doing. He was sniffing around because Alice was successful and settled now. People like him always circle back. We argued briefly, but Alice insisted she had it under control. "I'm just talking to him, that's it," she promised. I didn't believe her. Neither did Martha. But we had to let it go. Alice was an adult, married, and making her own decisions. Still, that night, something changed. We didn't realize how big it was until later. Sometimes, I wonder if I missed signs. Alice always pushed herself harder than she needed to, like she thought she had something to prove. Maybe deep down, she never really felt like she missed something, and Donald's return gave her a fantasy she didn't want to let go of. Things stayed quiet for a few weeks, but then one Saturday, Matt came by alone to borrow some tools. We talked casually for a bit, and then he let slip that Alice had been tired lately because of the baby. Martha froze, and I stared at him. "She's pregnant?" I asked, shocked. Matt froze, panic flooding his face. "Oh man, you didn't know?" His eyes widened with guilt and embarrassment, realizing he'd accidentally exposed Alice's deliberate secrecy. A sharp pain twisted in my chest. This wasn't forgetfulness. Alice chose to keep us in the dark. Donald's fingerprints were all over this. He was already pulling strings, cutting us out piece by piece. That hurt deeply. She deliberately hadn't told us. Something felt off. Later that evening, Alice called, distant and awkward, confirming the pregnancy. She said she meant to tell us but had been overwhelmed. Her voice felt detached, like speaking to strangers. We saw her soon after, 8 months along, smiling and joking but clearly distant. Nothing like before. Donald's name never came up, but his shadow was everywhere. Around that same time, Donald started appearing more frequently in Alice's life. He convinced her to name the baby Donald Jr. It felt like a gut punch, like he was marking territory. Martha cried when she found out. I tried to keep it together, but the hurt was real. Donald also privately hinted to me that if he wasn't welcomed warmly, he'd consider legally pursuing visitation rights for the grandchild. It felt like blackmail, pure and simple. as if disappearing for 25 years could be erased. It wasn't just arrogant, it was laughable. But dangerous arrogance can still do damage. Matt privately confessed Donald was pressuring him too, suggesting that his lack of enthusiastic support for Alice's bonding with Donald might jeopardize Matt's marriage. Donald was quietly manipulating everyone, but Alice couldn't or wouldn't see it. We were all being pushed out by the ghost of a man who hadn't earned any place in our lives. The weeks leading up to the birth felt tense and distant. Every conversation with Alice felt forced, every interaction shadowed by Donald's presence. Martha and I felt more and more like outsiders in the family we'd built ourselves. The joy of anticipating our first grandchild was overshadowed by uncertainty and dread. Matt became withdrawn, visibly stressed and exhausted from trying to navigate the minefield Donald had created. He admitted he felt like walking on eggshells around Alice, afraid that any disagreement might break their fragile peace. I wanted to support him, but I felt just as powerless. Finally, the day arrived when Alice went into labor. We hoped, despite everything, that the baby's arrival might help heal some of the wounds Donald had opened. We had no idea how wrong we were. When Alice went into labor, Martha and I waited anxiously at home for the call, expecting we'd rush to the hospital as soon as possible. Hours passed without word, and our anxiety grew. When the phone finally rang, the baby had already arrived. Martha cried softly on the drive over, hurt we hadn't been included earlier. Walking into the hospital room, we froze at the sight of Donald, comfortably sitting beside Alice's bed, cradling my grandson as though he'd earned that right. My fists clenched involuntarily, anger and resentment flooding through me. Donald's eyes met mine with a smugness I recognized immediately. "Long time no see, Willie," he drawled. I forced my voice steady. "You're holding my grandson." He raised an eyebrow, his smile cold. "Our grandson." Alice lay in bed, exhausted but glowing, seemingly oblivious to the tension. She introduced the baby to us cheerfully, as though nothing unusual had happened. Martha held the baby briefly, her joy mixed painfully with sorrow. The moment felt stolen, corrupted by Donald's presence. As Martha cooed softly to our grandson, Donald pulled me aside under the guise of friendly conversation. He leaned in, voice low. "Look, Willie, I know you don't like me, but I'm here to stay. If you try to push me out, I'll make things complicated. Grandparents have rights, you know. See this, Willie? It's about time I got my family back." "Took long enough," he smirked arrogantly, eyes gleaming with a sense of victory he didn't deserve. "You did a decent job stepping in, but blood is thicker, right?" His threat hung in the air, clear and unmistakable. Anger surged within me, but I kept my expression neutral. I couldn't give Donald the satisfaction of seeing he'd rattled me. I simply stared him down until he stepped back, pretending our exchange was casual banter. Matt stood in the corner of the room, clearly uncomfortable. When our eyes met, I saw the same helplessness I felt. He nodded slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement of our shared discomfort. Martha gently returned the baby to Alice, and we excused ourselves shortly after, claiming not to want to overwhelm her. The drive home was silent, both of us lost in thought. Martha quietly wept, mourning the moment we'd envisioned for years, now forever tarnished. That night, I lay awake, replaying Donald's words, feeling helpless and angry. The family I'd fought so hard to build was slipping away, and I had no idea how to stop it. So after that, things only got worse. Donald didn't just fade away after his threat. He became more prominent, embedding himself deeper into Alice's everyday life. She began skipping out on family dinners and gatherings, citing exhaustion or busyness as reasons. Each excuse felt hollow, but Martha and I tried to accept them, desperate not to push her further away. Our logistics company, something I built specifically with Alice's future in mind, started to suffer. Alice had always been involved, passionate about taking it over one day. Now, she hardly showed up, missing important meetings and leaving tasks unfinished. When I gently confronted her, she'd brush it off casually, claiming motherhood was her only priority now. Her detachment stung deeply. One evening, after a particularly tough day at work, my phone rang. It was Alice. Her voice was blunt, devoid of warmth. "I've decided to sell my shares, Willie. Donald wants to invest, and I think he deserves a chance." My heart sank. "Absolutely not," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Alice, he's manipulating you. He abandoned you, remember?" Her reply was sharp, almost rehearsed. "He's changed. He wants to make things right, and he has good ideas for the business." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Donald had wormed his way into Alice's trust, turning her against the family that had always been there for her. Anger boiled inside me, but I kept my composure. "He's playing you, Alice. He doesn't deserve a penny from what we built together." She scoffed bitterly. "We? It's always been yours. You've just been waiting to hand it to me as a reward for being the daughter you chose. Component placement. Donald opened my eyes. It's always been yours. And you've been dangling it like a carrot, controlling me all along. My chest tightened in disbelief and anger. Alice, that's Donald talking. He's poisoning your mind. This business was always built for you. No, she shot back coldly, her words precise and cutting. Donald deserves a chance, and I'm giving it to him. End of story. The line went dead, leaving me stunned and hollow, betrayed beyond comprehension. Her words hit like a slap, painful and shocking. That's not fair, I managed to say, my voice thick. I've only ever wanted the best for you. She paused, and I could almost hear her hesitation before the cold edge returned. Well, this is what's best for me now, whether you like it or not. After she hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Martha found me there, staring blankly into space. When I explained what had happened, she broke down, crying softly into my shoulder. We were losing Alice, piece by piece, to a man who didn't deserve her. But what Donald clearly didn't understand, and maybe Alice forgot, is that this wasn't a lemonade stand. The company's bylaws required board approval for any share transfers. Always had. It was in the shareholder agreement she signed when I gifted her the equity. She couldn't sell or assign control to anyone, let alone someone like Donald, without jumping through a legal minefield. The following day, Matt showed up at our doorstep looking exhausted and defeated. He quietly admitted Alice had lashed out at him for questioning the share transfer. Donald had warned Matt explicitly that opposing him would mean risking his marriage. I'll testify, Matt said firmly, surprising even himself. He's manipulating her. And if she won't see it, I'll be the one to say it out loud. I'm stuck, Willie, Matt whispered, visibly shaken. If I fight too hard, she'll walk away. But if I say nothing, she'll destroy everything you've built. His desperation mirrored my own. Donald had carefully set the stage, isolating each of us, making resistance feel impossible. But I knew surrender wasn't an option. I had worked too hard, loved too deeply, to let Donald back in and dismantle our family and our business. That night, Martha and I decided it was time to fight back, legally, strategically, decisively. Donald might have won the first few battles, but we would make sure he wouldn't win the war. We wasted no time. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with Alan, our family attorney. Alan was a no-nonsense guy, with a reputation for winning tough cases. He listened carefully as I laid out the entire situation, his expression hardening as the details unfolded. Alan quickly began investigating Donald's background. Within days, he uncovered Donald's sketchy history of failed businesses, unpaid debts, and a trail of financial ruin he'd left behind. Alan even secured evidence that Donald was already quietly approaching investors, promising them control and influence in our company, promises he had no right or authority to make. Armed with this information, Alan advised me to document everything. He instructed me to keep track of every interaction Donald had with the company, every conversation Alice had about the shares, and any possible manipulation attempts. I felt reassured. Having a clear plan eased some of my anxiety. Alan printed out one email chain where Donald literally wrote, "Once I'm in, I'll restructure operations. Our team is already in place." "He's promising equity he doesn't own, Willie," Alan said, sliding the emails across the desk. "That's securities fraud. Investors can sue him or worse." That was all I needed to hear. This wasn't just manipulation. It was criminal stupidity. But Donald wasn't finished playing his games. He requested a private meeting, which I reluctantly agreed to, wanting to keep things civil for Alice's sake. We met at a local diner, where Donald immediately dropped his friendly act. "Willie," he began with false politeness, "we both know this doesn't have to get ugly." "It already is ugly," I said bluntly. Donald leaned forward, lowering his voice threateningly. "Look, fighting this publicly will only make you look bitter. Do you really want everyone thinking you're trying to deny Alice her rightful inheritance?" My jaw tightened. "Don't pretend you care about Alice. You've only ever cared about yourself." Donald's smile turned icy. "You underestimate me. I have no problem making sure everyone hears a different story, one where you're the controlling stepfather holding Alice back." His threat was clear, but I refused to back down. I held his gaze, my voice steady and unflinching. "You picked the wrong fight, Donald. You're gonna regret this." After that confrontation, Alan shut that threat down the moment I brought it up. "He has no standing," he said flatly. "A man who hasn't seen his daughter in 2 decades doesn't suddenly get rights to a child he's never met. That's not how the law works, Willie." I knew it was an empty threat, but that didn't make it any less irritating. Alan advised me to move quickly. We officially filed documents contesting Alice's right to transfer shares without board approval. Donald responded with counterclaims, setting the stage for an intense legal battle. Meanwhile, Matt struggled deeply at home. Alice was becoming increasingly volatile, lashing out whenever he questioned Donald's motives. One evening, he showed up at our house again, visibly shaken and exhausted. She threatened to leave if I don't support her, Matt confessed quietly, eyes filled with despair. I'm losing her, Willie. Seeing his distress strengthened my resolve. Donald's manipulation wasn't just threatening our business, it was tearing apart the family we'd built. I promised Matt we'd do everything possible to protect both him and Alice from further harm. It was time for a line to be drawn, not just in court, but at home. Alan said we couldn't wait anymore, and for once, I agreed with him fully. Alice is bound by the same shareholder agreement as everyone else, Alan reminded me. It's got a forced buyout clause for breach of fiduciary duty, and she's violated it 6 different ways. You're not firing your daughter, you're enforcing a contract. Alan closed the file, hands folded, eyes locked on mine. I'm going to say this as plainly as I can, Willie, he said, voice low and direct. If you want to protect the business, you have to remove her now. Buy her out, freeze the shares, and tighten the bylaws. Permanently. Because if you don't, Donald's going to keep bleeding you dry through her. I didn't respond at first. I just stared at the papers spread across the desk. Profit loss charts, project delays, shareholder tension, contracts. Alice had ignored. Investor calls she'd skipped. I'd built this company from scratch, brick by brick, day by day. I started it so she'd never have to struggle the way Martha and I did. And now I was sitting here, being told that to save it, I had to sever her from it completely. Alan leaned forward. You're a smart man, Willie. You already know what I'm saying is true. You've given her chance after chance. She's not just unstable, she's compromised. And he's using her like a proxy. If she keeps ownership, he gets influence. He's already promised fake equity to outsiders. He's gambling with your life's work. I took a breath and let it out slowly. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. It'll destroy her, I said. If I take everything from her, Alan cut in. She already gave it away. You're just cleaning up the wreckage. I sat back, swallowing a lump of bitterness. Memories flooded me. Her first day shadowing me in the office at 19, asking questions about logistics, planning out a new warehouse layout on a napkin like it was the blueprint for her future. The pride I felt watching her step into boardrooms. The way I used to see myself in her ambition. But that version of Alice didn't exist anymore. I nodded slowly, voice low. Do it. Draft the papers. Full buyout. Immediate freeze on her voting rights. Alan gave a single nod, already opening a new folder. It's the right move. I'll have her served in 48 hours. Days passed, each filled with tense meetings and stressful planning. The legal procedures wore on all of us. Martha did her best to maintain a brave face, but I could see the toll it was taking. We held on to each other tightly, finding comfort and strength in our shared determination. Then came Alice. She barged into my office. She was gripping the envelope Alan had sent that morning. She must have ripped it open right there in the driveway because the flap was shredded, and the pages were bent like she'd been squeezing them the whole way in. You're buying me out, she snapped. No hello, no conversation, just straight to the explosion. I didn't flinch. I stayed in my chair, hands folded, voice steady. I offered you a clean exit, one that protects the business, one that gives you financial security and saves face. She scoffed. Protect the business? You're protecting yourself. You just want me out of your life? No, Alice, I said, calm but cold. I want Donald out of my business. And if that means separating you from it too, so be it. He's using you like a Trojan horse, and I'm not letting him inside my gates. She took a step closer, practically shaking with rage. I'm not your enemy, Willie. Then stop acting like one, I shot back. You brought him into board discussions. You leaked investor names to him. You gave him access to internal docs and offered him power in a company he never lifted a finger to build. That's not naivety anymore. That's sabotage. She looked stunned, hurt, but not apologetic. That was long gone. I trusted him, she whispered. He's my dad. And I'm the man who raised you, I said, finally standing. Who paid for your braces. Who drove to your middle school play in the middle of a work crisis. Who taught you logistics, bottom lines, payroll cycles. And you threw that away for a man who called once and bought you coffee. She blinked, like she was forcing back tears, or fighting to hold on to the story Donald had fed her. You always made me feel like I had to earn everything, like I had to prove I was good enough for what you built. You didn't have to prove anything, I said. You just had to respect it, respect me, respect the family. Instead, you brought a snake back into this house and handed him the keys. She paused. Something flickered across her face. I'm not signing anything. I nodded. I figured. She straightened. Donald says I have a legal right to those shares. He's talked to people, lawyers. He's not just winging this. I laughed. Donald can talk to all the lawyers he wants. I've got Alan. And what you're forgetting is that being right on paper doesn't make you right as a person. She stepped back like I'd slapped her, but I was done dancing around it. You had a choice, I said. I offered you a way out, a dignified one, but you're too far under his spell to see it. So now? Now the gloves have come off. I'll fight you, she whispered. I nodded. Then I guess I'll see you in court. She stood there for another few seconds, as if waiting for me to take it back, to soften. I didn't. That man is gone, the one who built his world around her, the one who would have given her everything without hesitation. She buried him the day she let Donald into our boardroom. She turned and left without another word. Martha came around the corner a minute later, eyes red, clearly having heard most of it. Did you mean it? She asked. Every word, I said. As the court date approached, Donald's threats intensified. He tried desperately to sway public opinion, spreading whispers about me being jealous and controlling. But Alan remained unfazed, steadily preparing our case with precision and clarity. And when finally the day arrived, Martha squeezed my hand tightly as we entered the courtroom, silently promising we'd face whatever came together. Donald sat across the room, smug and confident, but I knew we were ready. This fight wasn't just for our business, it was for our family, and I intended to win. The courtroom felt cold and impersonal as Martha and I took our seats. Alan sat beside us, organizing his notes. Across from us, Donald exuded a false confidence, leaning back casually, whispering occasionally to Alice. She looked anxious, avoiding our eyes, torn between loyalty and confusion. Matt sat behind her, isolated and visibly troubled. When the judge entered, everyone stood briefly. Alan began his presentation, methodically outlining every detail. Donald's deceptive attempts at infiltrating the company, his promises to unauthorized investors, and his manipulation of Alice. Each point was reinforced by documented proof, emails, recorded conversations, financial records. Alan was precise and unwavering, leaving no room for doubt. Donald's attorney tried to paint me as controlling and possessive, claiming Donald was simply reconnecting with his daughter and legitimately trying to invest. But Alan swiftly countered, presenting evidence of Donald's threats and manipulations, including Matt's testimony, detailing Donald's intimidation tactics and their devastating impact on his marriage. Alan mentioned offhand that a few of Donald's would-be investors had quietly pulled out and were considering legal action. False promises, misrepresented positions. He might not be going to jail, but his reputation was circling the drain fast. Throughout the hearing, I kept glancing at Alice, seeing the pain and confusion on her face. Part of me wished we weren't here, that we could resolve things privately, as a family. But Donald had forced our hand. He'd made this courtroom confrontation inevitable. When it was Donald's turn to speak, he was smooth and rehearsed, painting himself as misunderstood, emphasizing his desire to support his daughter's future. But when Alan cross-examined him, Donald's facade began to crumble. He stumbled over inconsistencies, growing increasingly defensive under scrutiny. His temper surfaced, his responses becoming sharp and aggressive, revealing the true nature behind his charm. Alice watched in disbelief as Donald's carefully crafted image shattered publicly. Matt reached out gently, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off, visibly. The courtroom was sterile and still, like it hadn't seen real life in years. Martha sat next to me, her fingers laced through mine so tightly, it felt like she was anchoring me to the floor. Alan sat at our side, calm as ever, flipping through a tabbed binder, like he was prepping for a routine inspection, not a war. We're not here today because of a mistake. We're here because my client extended every opportunity for resolution and was met with hostility, manipulation, and a blatant attempt to seize control of a private company under false pretenses. He slid a thick manila folder onto the judge's desk. Included here is the formal buyout offer extended to Miss Alice. Generous, legally sound, and documented before this court date was even set. It was rejected. Not with a counteroffer, not with negotiation. Just flat refusal, backed by threats of litigation if we didn't hand over partial control to Mr. Donald, a man with no legal ties to the company and no professional experience qualifying him for decision-making authority. The judge raised an eyebrow as he flipped through the documents. This was sent prior to filing? Yes, Your Honor. October 20th. It was declined the same day. Alan then laid out everything. The digital trail of Donald contacting outside investors. Emails where he referred to our business with Alice CC'd. Then came Matt's testimony. Quiet, reluctant but devastating. I told Matt he didn't have to speak, that we'd understand, but he shook his head. If I stay quiet, I'm letting that man win. I love Alice, but I'm not going to lie for her father. Not after everything he's done. He threatened to ruin my marriage, Matt said, voice shaking. He said if I didn't support him, Alice would see me as the reason her father was being locked out of her life. He told her what to say. She started quoting legal terms she didn't even understand. It was like she wasn't thinking for herself anymore. Donald's lawyer tried to paint the buyout as a coercive move to disinherit a rightful successor. But Alan fired back immediately. Miss Alice was already a shareholder. She wasn't being removed arbitrarily. She was offered a clean exit because her behavior compromised the company's stability. My client wasn't severing a daughter. He was protecting a business from someone actively working with an outsider to undermine it. Then it was Donald's turn. And this was the part I had been waiting for. He walked to the stand like he was being awarded something. Confident, smiling, he even winked at Alice as he passed. He tried the charm first, talking about or connecting with family, how he saw a chance to be part of something meaningful. He said he guided Alice through ideas for modernizing operations. Alan let him talk, then he got up and went for the throat. You say you only wanted to help her? Yes. You never asked for any money? No. You never tried to influence ownership structure? No. Alan smiled and reached into the file and pulled out a printed transcript. This was captured during a recorded call between Mr. Donald and one of the investors he approached without board approval, he said, sliding it to the judge. He pressed play on the audio clip. Donald's voice came through, relaxed and arrogant. Look, the buyout offer's meaningless. I've got Alice on board. She'll vote how I tell her to. We're already planning next steps. This guy can't stop us. Donald flinched. The courtroom went dead silent. Alan let it hang in the air for a full 5 seconds. Is that still your position? Alan asked, folding his hands. Donald's face tightened. That was taken out of context. It's your voice. I was frustrated. Alan leaned in. You were arrogant and manipulative. You saw an opportunity to walk into something you didn't build and take a piece of it because you thought no one would stop you. That's when Donald cracked. His tone shifted. The charm dropped. You think this guy deserves it all? He snapped, gesturing to me. She's my kid, my blood. I have a right to be involved. He's just a stand-in, a fill-in-the-gap stepdad with a superiority complex. The judge leaned forward. That's enough, Mr. Donald. When the judge returned after a short recess, his tone was sharp and final. The court finds that Miss Alice cannot transfer or assign her shares without explicit board approval. Furthermore, Mr. Donald has no standing in this company, legally or professionally, and his involvement constitutes an attempt to interfere in the governance of a private business. The evidence demonstrates a pattern of manipulation, coercion, and misrepresentation. Mr. Harper's claims are dismissed. Permanently. Bang. That was it. The bailiff moved in fast and ushered Donald out, still muttering curses under his breath. As we stood to leave, Donald exploded in rage, confronting Alice openly. This is your fault. You promised me control, and now look at this mess you've created. His harsh words echoed through the courtroom, shattering any remaining illusions Alice had about him. Alice stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Matt stepped protectively between her and Donald, gently guiding her away. Donald stormed out, his angry threats still lingering in the air. I felt no satisfaction in his defeat, only sorrow for the damage he'd caused. The courtroom fell into shocked silence. Alice stared at Donald, eyes wide with disbelief, visibly shaken. Her voice came out faint, wounded. Donald, what are you saying? We had barely stepped outside the courthouse when Donald stormed toward us, his face contorted in bitter rage. He didn't hesitate before unleashing on Alice, loud enough for the gathered onlookers to hear. You're worthless, Alice, he shouted viciously. I wasted months pretending to care about you. And for what? You couldn't even deliver your end of the deal. I deserved better than a weak, gullible daughter like you. You're pathetic. Alice recoiled as though physically struck, staggering backward as she shook her head desperately. Her eyes filled rapidly with tears, voice cracking with raw anguish. Stop it, Donald. Stop lying. You said you loved me. I gave you everything. He sneered, openly laughing cruelly at her distress. Loved you? I barely knew you. And from what I've seen, you're not worth knowing. You're just as pathetic now as when I left you the first time. At that, Alice completely unraveled. She lunged forward, tears streaming uncontrollably, her voice rising to a frantic, shattered scream. You're a monster! How could you do this? You promised! You lied! You ruined everything! She crumbled to her knees, sobbing violently, her screams dissolving into heart-wrenching cries that echoed painfully through the courtyard. Matt rushed to kneel beside her, pulling her gently into his arms. Alice, please, it's over. He's not worth it. Donald stepped back with cold indifference, disgust clear on his face as he turned away. Good luck picking up those pieces, he spat dismissively, striding away without another glance. I stood frozen, fists clenched, breathing heavily. Martha clung to my arm, trembling in shock. We watched helplessly as Alice broke down completely, finally seeing the horrifying truth about the man she'd chosen over the family who had always been there for her. Alice approached Martha and me slowly, her expression broken and remorseful. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't realize. I didn't see. I looked at her, heart heavy with sadness. We tried to warn you, Alice. We wanted to protect you. She nodded weakly, tears falling freely. Martha embraced her softly, whispering comforting words. I stepped back slightly, giving them space, feeling both relief and profound sorrow. This victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the fractures left within our family. In the weeks following the trial, Donald disappeared, leaving behind a trail of unpaid debts and broken promises. Alice began counseling, working to repair the damage done to her marriage and family relationships. Matt stood by her, patient and supportive, determined to rebuild their life together. Our business slowly stabilized, free from Donald's interference. But the emotional scars remained, deep and painful. Trust had been damaged, relationships strained. Martha and I leaned heavily on each other, drawing strength from our bond. One evening, Alice came by, nervous but resolute. We talked openly for the first time since everything had unraveled. She acknowledged the hurt she'd caused, accepting responsibility for her actions. I listened quietly, seeing genuine regret in her eyes. I can't change what happened, she admitted softly, but I want to try to rebuild. She looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. I let him use me. I didn't see it until it was too late. I lost the company. I nearly lost my marriage, and I don't even know if I deserve to be here. You don't, I said evenly. I looked directly at Alice, making sure there was no room for misunderstanding. My tone was firm and uncompromising. You can come here. You can see your mom. You'll be treated with basic respect, but don't mistake that for reconciliation. She stared at me, not sure what she was hearing. I didn't build my life around raising someone else's child just to be told it didn't matter. You gave everything we built to a man who vanished, the second life got hard, and then you defended him while he tried to take everything I protected. That wasn't just a mistake, Alice. She sobbed quietly, head in her hands. Martha sat beside her silently, rubbing her back, tears in her own eyes. I let them have their moment. But when Alice finally looked at me again, I spoke clearly. The only reason we'll still share a room now and then is because of your mother. For her sake, I'll be civil. For her sake, I'll be polite. But don't expect anything more from me. I'm done pretending this is something it's not. Alice opened her mouth slightly, as if about to speak, then closed it, realizing the weight of what I'd just laid out. Her eyes filled, but I held her gaze steadily, refusing to soften my stance. She nodded slowly, tears glistening, but not falling. There were no further objections, no pleas for reconsideration. Alice had finally understood the severity of what she'd lost, and why she'd lost it. In the months that followed, life moved forward, but never back to what it once was. Family dinners resumed, though more quietly, marked by careful conversation and guarded interactions. Alice visited often enough, but we spoke about safe topics, weather, movies, the baby. Never again about the business or the wounds she'd inflicted. Laughter still came occasionally, but it was cautious, tempered by the awareness of lines drawn and trust forever altered. Matt made attempts to bridge the gap, but he eventually accepted the new reality. He knew where I stood, respecting my boundaries without question. Alice herself seemed quietly resigned, understanding that our relationship had fundamentally changed. We still showed up when it mattered, but the easy warmth, the father-daughter bond built on unconditional trust, was permanently diminished. It was a new normal, colder and harder, but honest. The scars from Donald's poison ran deep, a constant reminder of the choices Alice made and the man I had become in response.